Absolutely. No doubt at all. Go to a game jam. Doesn't matter how little you know. Just do it. Just do it.
Welcome back, everybody. So with the Global Game Jam right around the corner, I thought we'd talk about game jams today. Obviously, we're doing a bit different today. I thought it would be a good chance to bring on some of my friends who are game developers and leaders in the community and just do like a roundtable discussion about game jams. So with that, why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Branden Mittendorf. I am the chairman for the International Game Developers Association Cincinnati chapter. I am also the IGDA regional coordinator for the Midwest, and I've been hosting game jams for about the past 7 years.
Hey there, I'm Austin Huebner, and I'm one part of Jolly Crouton, with Clayton being the other part. And yeah, I made Matchpoint.
I'm Clayton Belcher. I'm the vice chair of IGDA Cincinnati. I'm half of Jolly Crouton Media with Austin, and I also teach new media at the University of Cincinnati.
Obviously, the first question would be, what's a game jam? Does anybody want to jump in on this?
No, so a game jam is typically you have a certain amount of time to work on a game, and you are given a specific theme or a topic to work off of. So in previous years, people have had anywhere between 12 to 24 to 48 hours to work on a game, all based off of a very vague theme that is given to everybody. So at the end of that time frame, the group of people that are working on it will all have various different games based off of that. So for instance, one year, the theme was waves. And like, well, what different ways can you make a game about waves? And you just kind of group up with your friends, or you meet up with some strangers, you learn some new tools, and just crank out a game in a set amount of time.
You eat a lot of snacks too. Pizza.
There's a lot of snacks. There's a lot of pizza.
A lot of people getting together, a lot of making new friends. That's actually probably the best part of game jams. Not to hop right into another topic, but one of the best parts for me is actually a lot of friends that I've gotten in the community in Cincinnati has been directly through game jams. Being in a game jam with somebody means that you're working with them for up to 48 hours, or probably longer than that with the global game jam. And as a result, you get to know them pretty well and how they work and everything like that. And I think actually, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the first time I met Clayton was through the first game jam I ever participated in. I think that was in 2016.
Yeah, was that the Ring Breaker?
Ring Breaker, yeah. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure that's the first time. You might I can't remember if that's exactly the first time we met, but certainly the first time I started, talking with you and stuff like that. And that led to a situation where Clayton helped me out with a game I was working on, and that eventually became a game that we published under Jolly Crouton. It was awesome.
Oh, I was going to say that would have been before IGDA, actually. That would have been Cincinnati Game Developers, or even the Unity group.
It was definitely tier 1, because I remember Ring Breaker. We were working in that one room together.
We did 2 jams at tier 1. The theme was ritual for that one.
Ritual, yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we had the Bridezilla and the Ring Breaker.
Yeah.
Such a great concept.
That was a wonderful game.
I would add that there are other formats that game jams can take. So we, as a group, are used to doing game jams in person. We do a global game jam site at the University of Cincinnati, usually, where we have 50 or 60 people, and that will break up into teams. But I think maybe I don't know what was first, but another format is just online. You can do online game jams, especially now with the way things are. There are places like Ludum Dare, which will do pretty frequent game jams where they give a theme out and people make their entries. I used to run one called the Buzzwick every year, which was purely online. So you don't have to be near a place that does game jams in order to participate in a game jam.
He's going to get it. Oh yeah, look at the Buzzwick. That's really cool. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, dude. This is what you can get if you're part of a cool game jam. itch.io is another place. I don't know if you mentioned that. They have tons of game jams. They basically have a game jam going constantly, and most of them are really small. I actually only participated in one itch.io game jam. I think it was called the One Button Game Jam or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was. And I made a game called Pipes and Presses. where you had a series of pipes and this ball that would go through the pipes. It was a 2D game. And if you pressed the space bar, there are these little things that change where the route would go. So basically where the ball would go into the next pipe, if you press space, it would rotate, it would go in the other direction. It was a puzzle game trying to get the ball to the goal with the minimal amount of presses that you could possibly get. So that was pretty fun, and also totally online that I did with my friend Andy.
Let's say that somebody just like has no experience and no idea what they're like, how to get into a game jam, and they want to participate in one. What would your suggestions for them be?
For someone who doesn't, for someone who wants to participate in a game jam but are questioning if they have the skills to do so or anything like that, I still highly encourage people to go through and do it, because game jams aren't an event for people just to flex their skills to see if they can make a game within a set amount of time. It's still it is like a prime learning opportunity for people. It's good for people to learn the tools that are being used to make games. It's good for experienced developers to try something new. For new people joining game jams, there's still a lot that can be worked on that's outside of coding or developing stuff like that. Like you can still make a tabletop game. You can learn new skills from the experienced people that are in the area, and you can learn really quickly doing that because they'll tell you the pros and cons of utilizing certain things, or can show you the resources that they use to learn it. So it's a real quick hands-on learning experience, in my opinion.
I would absolutely recommend doing a game jam. Even if you have zero experience, it's a good way to be exposed to the process of game development, whether you even enjoy it. Most game developers are pretty friendly folk. They want to make cool stuff together. If you show up, then you can join a team. Even if you're not useful at all, you can just be exposed to it, make some friends. You can kind of figure out what areas of game dev you like maybe you tinker a little bit with the programming, you pair with one of the coders, maybe you do some art, 2D or 3D art, you get used to it. Even if you've never touched it before, you can just be exposed to it and see what you like and don't like. And then, of course, make friends with it and continue to learn and even make stuff together eventually. Absolutely. No doubt at all. Go to a game jam. Doesn't matter how little you know, just do it.
And seriously about that, because there have been a lot of times where we've had a game jam and somebody, doesn't have a team or whatever. And this is a lot easier done when you're in person, which unfortunately with this, situation going on right now, that may not be as easy to just like move yourself into a group. But there have been plenty of people that have been wanting to learn Unity or they may have some experience coding or something like that. And they come to our group or whatever. And since I, do a lot with Unity and stuff like that, I'll just basically show them how to, program in Unity. Now, of course, with the limited amount of time, it makes it a little tough to fit that in and also get like all the grand ideas your team's going to inevitably come up with. But it's definitely still worth it. And, you get to experience with people that probably are, either better or at your skill level, working on something over a period of time where you'll learn so much. And yeah, it's it's crazy how much you learn. Even if you're good at, whatever you do, even in those cases, you can still push yourself. I mean, there is a time limit after all. So it does take a lot of endurance to get through something like that.
Right. The one thing, like, even if you're the type of person that it's hard, you're introverted and you have a hard time just going up to people asking if you can be a part of their group with a bunch of strangers, don't feel completely comfortable going up to the organizer as well, saying like, hey, I'm doing all this, I really want to dive into blank, or you want to learn the process. If you have some sort of like an idea of where you want to go, what I typically do is if people approach me for something like that, I will partner them up with more experienced people, mostly the people that are in this call, so they can learn from them about the process and be a part of a team and whatnot. So you're always going to be learning something no matter what.
Yeah, for context, Branden is actually the one that's been putting on along with Clayton as well. I think all the IGDA leadership roles do some part with the game jam. But from what I remember, Branden's been the one that's been leading most of the recent game jams we've had in Cincinnati. So that he is speaking from experience. I didn't know if that was clear or not.
Yeah, he's been setting up game jams for at least 5 years now. Maybe at least at least probably longer than that.
I think through IGDA, I want to say 6 or 7 years, but probably game jams in general, maybe a little longer.
Yeah. Speaking of colleges, there might even be opportunities to do a game jam through your college, even if there isn't like a local, organization, IGDA chapter or whatever. It's very possible that there's other game developers at your college. You might be in the computer science route, or you might be doing some art or whatever else. But I bet there are other people around, especially at colleges and stuff like that would be interested in hosting some kind of game jam. So that might be one opportunity. I don't know too much about that part because most of my game jam experience has actually been after college.
Right. For finding a game jam or an area for the global game jam, you can go on the global game jam website and search the city that you are in and seeing if there is a location that is nearby that is hosting it, and you can probably participate with them in some capacity that way, whether it's in person or virtual. If you're just looking to join a community that is hosting the game jam, typically you can find student organizations at local colleges, IGDA chapters that are spread across the world. And there are also student chapters for the IGDA that are also able for you to join and participate in game jams that way. If for some reason that there's not, that means that you can do it. And you may find out that there's people that are in the area that would like to participate in it. And you can get something started that way.
I don't know if we can plug ourselves, but if you want to start a community in your area and you want some advice, then we'll get you contact information, I guess. We'd love to help you with that. We started an IGDA chapter, so if you want to do that, let us know.
Yeah, if you guys want to get in contact with any of these guys, I'll put all of their information in the description below, so you guys can check them out. And later on, we'll talk about a little bit more in detail, probably how you can set up or like build a community a little bit. We'll talk about our experience with that and kind of how we got started and how it ended up turning into what it is. And now that we have this IGDA chapter, we have this community in the Cincinnati area that can do game jams together and brings a lot of people together.
Yeah. Maybe a community building is a separate video because
we can go into it in more detail.
We have a lot to talk about for building a community.
Yeah, we could just do a little bit with it, specific to like the game jam stuff. But anyway, I know earlier you were talking about beginners getting into game jams and how you can learn from people, and I wanted to kind of take a different perspective on that and say, if you're a more experienced person, like the last game jam that I had, it was January last year, so I was still really experienced, and me and Austin and Clayton were actually working on a game together. We were going to do the game jam together, and we have some friends that wanted to work on it that aren't as experienced, and then we also met up with these two people from Columbus who wanted to just come down and do the game jam in Cincinnati, see how it goes. And that their skill set happened to complement ours very well. They were, animators, modelers, and so we ended up working with them, and that was a fantastic experience because we were all very experienced in those things, and we were able to create this game, Gastronaut, that was, in my opinion, it's like the best game jam game that I've ever made, like the furthest to like the complete game anyway. So that was a really cool experience for me because I got to meet some people that were also really experienced in skills that I had no knowledge about. So
I think that it can be difficult, even when you're experienced, not to get buried in, like for one thing, large projects, or if you work a day job, then it's really hard to find time for projects. game jams in that way can be a nice way to break out of that pattern and make something small. It gives you motivation and a structure to make something small really fast. So you don't need to worry about it being long-term or making it perfect. You just hop into this thing with a couple of people, if you're experienced, and make something together really fast, and then you put it down. So that's another reason to do it, even if you're kind of versed in making games.
That's how I first started making games, really, past college, that is, because I always made small, really, actually, very small games in college. Not college. It was in college, but also in high school. But after that, a lot of my, game development was actually just making game jams because it was so fun to do. And so, I make it a point every year. I have to do at least one game jam, and generally that's the Global Game Jam. It does take a lot of energy to do that, and so I get a little exhausted, and it's difficult to continue doing game jams throughout the year because it just takes so much creative and just energy in general.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who work crazy hours, and they'll do like 12-hour days like every day for I don't know how long, and they don't really get a whole lot of time to be creative in their workplace. And like they'll just take the 1 or 2 days off that they need for global. They go do global. They get to get all their creativity out, whether that's drawing up tabletop pieces or making music or whatever, and they get to say that they worked on this team, they made this thing, and they're really happy with it, and they can't wait for the next one or next year or whatever. So
we should probably specify that the Global Game Jam is like the biggest game jam ever.
It
happens every winter at the beginning of the year, usually January or February, I think.
Right.
And I couldn't give you the numbers off the top of my head, but I know there are hundreds of locations, thousands of games and teams all over the world. It's probably your best bet for finding an in-person game jam. This year is not going to be in person because of how things are, but usually you probably could find one near you in at least, I don't know, a 50-mile radius, I would hope.
Yeah, I think last year, just to put in perspective of how many places and games are being made, I think last year the amount of games that were made in total were like just under the amount of games that were released on Steam throughout the whole year. So I think it was like 8,000 plus games that were made. And then if all 8,000 of those games have at least anywhere between 2 to 4 people, if not more, working on that game, that adds up really fast.
So one of the things that I find really interesting about game jams is, you talk about you have this daily grind that people go through, and this is a nice break to that, to let them just do something different, work on something that they don't have this huge time sink in. Maybe it's, their day job is something completely unrelated to game dev, and this gives them a chance to really like jump into what they're passionate about. And one of the things that I find really cool is that there are a lot of games out there that started as global game jam games. And so they actually started with just like this random idea on a weekend. They made something really simple, just a prototype, and then they took that idea, they iterated on it, and then they ended up releasing it as a full game later on. So what I want to ask you guys is, are there games that that have done that? What's your favorite game jam game or game that came from a game jam?
So I'll go first real quick because mine's maybe boring. But my first commercial title, Splotches, actually started as a game jam game. There's this really fun community that I first joined as probably a 10-year-old called the Daily Click. And that was where I got my feet wet with game development. There's the Click scene, which uses Click Team's Fusion engine and stuff. And there's a whole subculture around it. It's super fun, a bunch of history. But we had this yearly competition called the Tourney. And somebody, Peblo, I think, mistyped the name without the N. So it became the Turi. So it was our big game. We didn't call them game jams. We call them compos because I think it's a European term for game jams. We had a compo every year. And Splotches was one tiny game that I made in, I think, a week. And then I blew that out into a major release that is on iPad and Steam and is going to be on Switch. So it's maybe not the most glamorous games.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. That's really cool. And hopefully this gives you a chance to like plug your own stuff. I think that's fine.
So I know there is one game that I remember being a game jam game, but I might be wrong about that. It's the game where you have to operate on people.
Surgeon Simulator. Yeah.
Surgeon Simulator, that's what it is. Yeah.
It did start as a game jam game.
Played that game, but it looks really fun. And if they made that, like, even if it's just a prototype during the weekend, that's actually kind of crazy. Yes, that might be one of my favorites. I actually don't know of a lot of game jam games that have gone on to be, full releases. So I'm actually aware of a lot of those.
So that's the thing, is that there's a lot, and right, you may not know it. Like, there is the Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is like a really popular virtual reality game, and that was a game jam game. I have a list of some of the success stories here, because there's one in particular that I was trying to find, but the name escapes me. But I think it was a part of the game jam where it was just like I think the theme was one, and I can't remember the name of the title for the life of me. I know I have it on PlayStation, but it was one. You had one life, you had one arrow, you had one boss you had to kill, and there was one way to kill the boss. I can't remember what it's called. I wanted to say it was Titan something, but
Titan Souls or something like that.
Yes, that's what it was. Yes, it was
Titan Souls,
because it was inspired off Dark Souls. That was honestly, that was probably what really got me into doing game jams, is that I saw that. I'm like, someone made this in like 2 days, or they took the core idea of that in 2 days and then they expanded on it. I think that one was really cool just because I'm a big Dark Souls fan. One of my favorite games that were made locally, a part of the events that I've run, I don't remember the names of them, but someone made a game where you were stranded on a desert island and you needed to power your computer with coconuts to send messages out. But what they didn't realize is they basically created an educational game on how to learn Morse code through coconuts, basically. So I thought that one was really cool. The ones that really stick out to me are the ones where like you're like sort of learning something with it in a way. I know one of the first game jams that we ever did, actually when it was probably the first game jam that we did where you guys worked on Rune Knight, was he made a game. I think this was also, the theme was ritual. You worked at like a restaurant and there were all these Japanese monsters that were like invading the restaurant. So you had to pull out your menu, and you had like the 9 dots, and you had to write the kanji of whatever the name was. So you had a booklet next to you that had an image of what the creature was, and then the kanji symbol for it. And if you walked up to it and wrote the kanji for it, it would disappear.
That's awesome.
So I thought that one was also really cool.
That is awesome.
There's some really cool ones that come out.
Take notes for our language game, Austin.
Exactly, right. I would still love to make one of those. Yeah, man.
Yeah, so for me, and I learned this from one of my earlier videos, is that Hollow Knight actually started as, it was built off of a game jam game. So they actually did a game jam and made a game called Hungry Knight, which was the same main character, and he went around killing insects and gathering food from the insects in order to stave off starvation, which was the core idea that they ended up changing slightly and then building into Hollow Knight. And so I love that game, and it blew my mind that it actually started as a game jam game. So that's really cool.
I have 2 more games that came to mind. One of them is, I'm pretty sure Baba Is You was a game jam game by RBT Kari.
Yeah.
Which is a brilliant game, absolutely brilliant. You should play that if you haven't played it. And then the other one is our friend Branden did a game called Project P for, not this Branden, a different Branden.
We know a lot of Brandens.
P for one of the Buzzwicks, and it was really fun. It was a game where you could choose whether to go through the game using weapons or being peaceful. You could also slap the enemies, which was just so hilarious to me. He went on and made that into a full game called Nameless, and it was very well made.
Yeah, I played that game all the way through. It was very good.
Like, what's the best thing that you've learned from a game jam?
That making games together is very different from making games alone.
Right.
There's like this pressure, I think, especially in the indie scene, to be a one-man band that does everything. You got to do the graphics, you got to do the music, you got to do the programming, the design, everything. And it shows you just how drastically different it is to make things together. I basically don't ever want to make a game by myself again. There's no need to do that. It's just much more fun to do it in collaboration with other brains you feed off of each other. You have good ideas. You can kind of not delegate. You can break up the work and share it. It's just a lot more fun.
Yeah, you're also leveraging people's strengths
Yes.
through all of it, because I know I don't want to do music or 2D artwork because I can lean on Clayton to do that. So
in a similar vein, this is something that I stress whenever I get a chance. I know I remember hating hearing this because I used to be an introvert, but it was like networking is really, really, really important, and it is. Yeah, I tell all my students, I tell everybody, you need to show up and do it. And it's the same in the game dev world. Meeting people, it leads to meeting people, leads to opportunities, leads to learning things, and it's just so much fun. It's just building a community and sharing things together is super fun. And I think that's my big takeaway from game jams. I call Global Game Dev Christmas because it's just so great.
It is actually great.
Yeah.
Lot for it.
Speaking of just like networking at Global and stuff like that, you'd be surprised of the people who participate in Global or where those people work and stuff like that, because you're just meeting up at a location or you're jumping into Discord to learn from some people. But I've definitely had people walk away where they've met somebody and they ended up getting an internship or something like that with them after the fact, whether that's through Global or just being a part of the community because they showed up at Global. So you just never know who you're going to meet at some places.
So I think for me, the best thing that I've learned, I don't know if it's the best thing, because when I initially thought about this question, I was like, is there anything like programming wise or like skill wise that I've learned specifically from Game Jam? And I don't think that's actually true. There really isn't, because a lot of the things that I do during the Game Jam are meant to be simpler, so that we can actually get it done in the amount of time that we have. So it's not as much about expanding your skills unless you want to. Like there are certain things that you can do during Game Jam, like pick a new engine to learn and make a very simple game in that, and do that. But for the most part, I stuck with Unity. But I was trying to think, what is the best thing, and it might be actually my own ability to work on something during a short period of time, like how effective I am at doing that, like how to work under pressure for a short period of time to make something that's really good, or as good as I can possibly make it during that time. And so I've learned that I can actually do that. Like I didn't know that I was even capable of working for that long straight or whatever. And I wouldn't recommend that to do that all the time, of course, right? I mean, that would be terrible for you, but it is nice to see that when I push myself to do something and make it really work, that I can actually deliver on that. So that might be the best thing. Probably not the best thing. I can't really think of a better one at the moment, but it's an interesting thing that I've learned about myself by doing the game.
I think understanding scope is
absolutely.
Because the example that I always like to use when in game jams or just people wanting to start a new game in general is everybody wants to make like a Call of Duty Tetris game. It's like, I want to make, it's going to be a puzzle game. It's going to do this. It's going to be a roguelike, and it's going to have multiplayer and all this other stuff. I'm like, you got 2 days to do this. So I think understanding scope, understanding your abilities, understanding your the team around you's abilities. It's great to have those big ideas and things that you would like to add to the game, but for a game jam, it's to make sure you get the core gameplay down first, and then any spare time you have after that is to work on the fun stuff.
I think that's
the additional stuff.
I think that's an important lesson for game dev in general, and that might make that a really good lesson, like maybe the best lesson from game jams, because you can apply it to bigger projects. Containing scope and cutting scope is a fact of life with making games and a lot of software in general. Actually, you want to make all the things, and it's always going to take more effort than you think and more time than you think. I think it's Hofstadter's law. It's always going to take more time than you think to make the thing. I would be surprised if any published game has ever had the full feature set that the creators would have liked. You always cut scope, always cut scope. So this is a good lesson to stay small at first, and you can iterate if you have time and grow it from there, but always start small.
Yeah.
Get down to the brass tacks.
To build on that a little bit, a lot of people when they go to make games, and they're, a lot of the beginners, they will choose more difficult scoped things to actually work on. So like, for example, Clayton joked that, some people might try to make an MMORPG, which granted, there are probably people out there that for their first game, they actually did make that very large thing. But in general, it's going to be difficult, and probably also make it so that you don't want to work on games. So one of the cool things about game jams is that you also get to practice finishing a game fully, right? And full is kind of a wrong term for it. But for a lot of people making games, they don't necessarily finish the projects they work on. They work on it for a couple of months, or in the worst case, they work on it for a couple of years and don't actually have something on the other end to show. But with game jams, you're forced to go through the entire process, and that means like considering UI. A lot of people when they make games, especially programmers, right? They'll only consider the actual fun part of making the game. But unfortunately, there are a lot of parts that aren't as fun. Maybe UI is fun for some people, but for a lot of programmers, it's like the extra thing you must tack on to make the game work. And so when you are forced to finish something, you have to come to terms with all the little individual things that you have to make work to actually come across with a game that is sort of complete. And that's not to say that during a game jam you must complete the game, but that is the goal, right? You do want to get as close to quote unquote finished as you can. But even if you don't finish a game, it's not a failure by any means. It's just you learning how to actually get to that point.
Yeah, I was going to mention that there's a lot of games in the game jams that we've done that people did and they didn't finish, right? But maybe they had one mechanic flushed out and that was their game basically. And that's not like a waste, right? Like you're still learning a lot. Those people, I think they walked away from it with probably the idea that, hey, next time I need to cut my scope down. Like that's, in my opinion, I think that's the best lesson that somebody can learn from a game jam, because you're right, Clayton, like this perpetuates through everything. This isn't just like game development, right? This is when I do software development, like this is part of what we work on every day. Like you have to think about scope and understand what that means, right? You can dream about making the next Skyrim or the next, MMORPG all you want, but in reality, a lot of people that are watching this video are probably, independent developers or hobbyists or people that are parts of a smaller team. And by a smaller team, I mean like at most maybe like 20 people. And that group of people, unless you've been in the industry for decades, like you're not going to be making that next big AAA game. Like that's just not how that works usually. There are a lot of independent games, obviously, that do very well, especially in the last few years. But you just have to think about, what can you do with your skills and the people that you work with, and understand like keeping scope small, get that done, iterate, build from there. And that's just like such a good thing to learn from this process.
I would say this is a place where the phrase "perfection is the enemy of good" is applicable. When as much as deadlines are stressful, they can help you limit what you do. Like if you're just out in the wild, hobbyist making your own game, you have this grand plan. It'll take you years because you want to have everything. You want it to be just right. And something I also learned from making Matchpoint is that having a deadline is good. Yes. If you set like a release date, like we hear about all these companies in the industry having crunch and everything, and that's there are issues with that, but there's a balance, I think, with deadlines. When you have an endpoint in mind that you if it's like your absolute cutoff point, it helps you make good design decisions. It helps you not spend your whole life on one project. So that's one of the benefits. Another benefit of a game jam is that, it's not gonna be the best game in the world. It may not even be fully complete, but it gives you practice at deciding, at prioritizing and deciding what to keep and what to get rid of.
Yeah, as an anecdote, for match point, we were getting close to a deadline, and I had always pushed back the deadlines for match point. I would continuously it's not done yet, can't be done yet. I would keep on pushing it back and back and back, and I would always have a new deadline. So that's good, but it didn't really mean much. I kept on pushing it back. But I remember, I think it was like 3 months before we actually ended up releasing the game, or maybe 2 months. I can't remember how long it was. But Branden actually came to us, and we had talked about doing this, but I didn't know that we were going to do it so soon. He actually set up a launch party for Matchpoint at a local bar called 16-Bit. And it had a date, and the people there were coordinating to actually have that go through. And the launch party, by the way, went great, but it actually meant that I had a real deadline that I wasn't able to push. I couldn't push it as much as I wanted. And Brandon was like, "Here's your deadline." And I was like, "Great, this is going to be a fun next 2 months."
Yeah,
and it was actually. It wasn't that bad. And we got it out there, and there were some bugs, but it ended up being one of the best game dev related things that I've done so far.
Yeah, I guess the one thing for the whole scope and learning all of this stuff is there are no failures. It's just opportunities to learn. Because if you treat it as a failure, then you're probably not going to want to do it again. But if you look at what did you learn from these situations, then it might be something for you to improve on for your next project. And I'm sure we all have stories about that.
All of us have worked on, every single one of us has worked on, and I think everybody that's ever worked in game development has probably worked on stuff that they would, I don't know if they would consider it a failure, like you said, but it was a learning experience that ended up not even turning into anything, right? Like it was a project you worked on, and that was it. That's all it was. It wasn't a game that you released, and that happens to everybody, and that's just a natural part of the process. So,
right.
All right, so I want to jump into the next point. What are some games that you've created at a game jam, and just like talk about those a little bit? I know you've already talked a little bit about that, but if there's anything else you want to add to that.
I'll go. So I'll mention my favorite game jam game that I've made. So Gastronaut was one that I worked with Branden, Clayton, and a couple other people with, and that was a really awesome game jam game. But it's not actually my personal favorite. Don't get me wrong, it was amazing. It was actually, probably one of the most polished, I guess, games that I've made out of a game jam game. And also the scope was actually quite big for what we did. I don't know if we can play some video or whatever of the game, just so that we can get an understanding. It was on a sphere, and you had to walk around collecting crystals and stuff like that, and making this guy's head, Gastronaut, his head get larger and larger and larger as the crystals fill into his head. I can't actually remember the backstory. We had
we were trying to plug a black hole with his giant head.
Oh, that's right. And we had the animation in the end that ended up actually breaking for the release of the game. That was pretty fun. But anyway, so that was my actual personal favorite, even though that really ranks high. I've done, I think, 8 game jam games. But my favorite actually is one that I did the year previous, called Day of the Dad.
My favorite.
And that also worked with Clayton. I don't believe Brandon was on that one. I worked with my friend, our friend Branden, and then we also had a couple other people. I think no, Brandon didn't work on that one.
No, he did.
He did. Yes.
Not this Brandon, or
the other
Brandon.
Yeah, so not one of the brands here. Andy, another guy that we worked with. But there was another programmer as well. I think his name is Jordan. There's a couple of people.
Yeah, we had Jordan.
So
we had.
Yeah, you guys had a fairly large team for that game.
Yeah, it was pretty large. The game was a ton of fun to work on. We actually made this game about a dad that, as the name might suggest, is in peril. He needs to make a bunch of treats for these ravenous kids that are sitting outside of his house. Otherwise, they won't go away. And also, I don't know if this was a part of the backstory of the dad, but he was the no pants dad, or the pantsless dad. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But it was very fun to work on. And at the time, I played a bunch of Overcooked. And so that game was like, oh man, this is a really fun game that was also made in Unity, by the way. And I was like, I should try making that kind of game. We didn't make a multiplayer version of that, but we made a single player, like pixel art version of that game. And I still remember to this day trying to get the high score. And the game got really hard as orders kept on coming in. And trying to gamify the system and like actually use glitches to get the best score. That was a really fun experience. Just trying to manipulate the mechanics to actually, be good at the game and stuff like that. So yeah, really enjoyed that one. But yeah, I've worked on all the ones I've actually worked on. I've really enjoyed. But that was probably one of the most memorable.
I've got the music stuck in my head now.
Oh yeah, me too.
I actually don't get a whole lot of time to actually work on games at Global Game Jams since I am the one hosting it. I'm the one that's running around making sure that all the teams are good. And some people may think it's like, well, how long does that actually take? I'm like, for me, what I do during Global Game Jams is I make sure everyone's good and they got everything in order for what they're working on. It's answering a lot of questions that people have. So I kind of have to have my fingers dipped in a little bit of everything, or at least to a point where I can guide them in the right direction or know somebody else at the game jam that I could introduce them to so they can get that question answered. I'm also the one that's running socials during the whole event. I'm making sure that if there's food or anything like that being ordered, that is what's coming in. Any other sort of announcement, presentations, things like that. That's all me and planning all that sort of stuff out. I do get to dabble and do some things. It's really like I made a material or I helped model this one little thing and then handed it off to a team. But a lot of it is me managing everything.
That's a lot of work. Keeping us filled with Starbucks and donuts is,
Yeah.
I think one of the best things that you do, Branden, is that if people come in and they're by themselves, a lot of these people are introverts. They're not people that are going to be able to join a group very easily or feel comfortable doing that. You just point them in the direction. You're like, hey, go talk to these people and they'll help you out. And that
most of the time when
perfect.
I tell people to go point to someone, they're really good friends of mine. I'm like, hey, he wants to learn all that he can learn, or they want to learn this, that, and the other. It's like, go talk to them. You'll be an expert by the end of the weekend.
I know that's helped a lot of people that I personally know. So yeah,
he's the switchboard of everything.
Yep,
exactly.
I was just gonna say, Day of the Dad was my favorite as well. I really enjoyed that one. But another one that we worked on that was really fun to me was the Unstoppable Shipment Pigeon Service.
The other one I wanted to mention.
It's kind of an awkward name, but it works out to USPS. And I made, how the USPS logo is like an eagle head. We made it a pigeon head. And so you were the unstoppable running pigeon mailman. It was a dude, a regular like buff dude in his underwear, I think, except your head was a pigeon head. And you had to collect mail that was all over the street. And you never stopped running, and you had to dodge things. It was an endless runner. You never had to, except that it had an end. You had to dodge things and jump and deliver mail into mailboxes. Yeah. And I remember having a lot of fun with that. Like we drew a grandma who would try to cross the street and make noises if you hit her, and there were taxis everywhere. And I remember having hilarious issues with the layering and the wheels just flying off. So it was a lot of fun to make that project.
So that project in specific had a bug in it that I didn't realize until like later, and it was like kind of too late to fix it at that point. But I put in this like little thing where if you knocked into a car, it would just push a force so to like kind of move it out of your way, right? Well, I didn't tune those values very good, and so they actually go flying. So you run into a car, it goes flying into the air. And because of how the game works, it can only move kind of across like this because you're trying to dodge them. I don't know if you've ever played Pepsi Man. That was kind of the inspiration for the game. So it looks like that, but it's not 3D. It's got like a 3D character, but everything else is 2D. It's a bit weird. So that car would go flying off, right? And then eventually later would come back around and would be basically in a further part of the level. And I thought it was really hilarious. And it would cause these like traffic jams that would occur. So like just this dynamic interplay between all these like random things that we put together. And there was this person that actually played the game for I think 30 minutes or 40 or something. It was a long time for a game jam game. And basically he was trying to get the highest score he possibly could, again, going along with Day of the Dad. And he got really good, better than me. Like I pride myself in being good at the games I make because I like those kinds of games where you're a lot of game feel in it, right? But this guy got extremely good at the game and had like techniques on how to go about playing it and like when you should get certain things. There was also a situation where there were two pieces of mail directly above each other, on the same plane basically. And so when you're running towards it, you can either get the one below or the one above, but the goal is to get all of them. So this guy found out that he could roll into the first and then jump at just the right moment to get the second one as well. And the reason those two were placed there was actually due to a glitch. It was a bug that I had. I didn't realize until the game released. That was a feature, not a bug. Yeah, it was a feature. It turned out to be a feature, right?
My favorite game jam game, I think, it's between Gastronaut and Wacky Tube Fighters. So I went to a game jam, and at the time I was working at this company, Kaleidoscope, and a lot of my friends there were Unity developers, and I was like, hey, why don't we do this game jam? And so we decided to do it, and we wanted to make this just like absolutely crazy idea of a game. And so, those like wacky inflatable flailing tube men at the car, at the, used car salesman or whatever, or car sales places. We were like, these are going to be the characters. We're going to make it multiplayer. So two of those guys fighting each other in a like car lot. Parking lot. And basically we just made them work with like random physics. So they were just flailing around, and we give the user the ability to choose a weapon for each of their hands. So they had like huge broadswords and a giant axe in one hand, and we had like crazy stuff in there. And then you would just like try to run into each other and hope that the physics made the weapons hit the other player. And it was just a whole lot of nonsense that everybody had a lot of fun with. So I think that one.
There's your tagline for game jams right there. A whole lot of nonsense that everybody had a lot of fun with.
Yeah,
exactly. That should be.
All right. So the next one is one of our last points here is your most memorable game jam experiences. So this doesn't really have to be specifically around a game necessarily, but just things that happened during a game jam that you guys remember and really love.
So I got one for this. So the first game jam game that I ever made, I guess first ever game jam that I participated in, was the Ring Breaker game jam, which, by the way, just as a aside, Ring Breaker was it was the ritual game jam. I think we've mentioned that a couple of times, and it was about a couple that was going to get married, but then you played it as this guy that needed to go and break them up, and basically defeat the bridezilla. Kind of questionable we went that direction. It was pretty hilarious though, what we ended up with, and it actually ended up being like a kind of what do you call them? A shmup almost, where you're trying to avoid all the bullets and stuff like that. And you played as this kind of buff guy that ran around and defeated all the enemies. It was 2D. And I specifically remember that at the very last second, the game was entirely broken, completely unplayable. There is no salvaging it. Well, there was, because I ended up doing that. So I at the very last moment, I realized that I changed something and it just stopped working. I think it had to do with collisions. Collisions stopped working or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. It might have been a tag, or I can't remember. But I think it was like literally minutes before I had to go up and show off the game to everybody in the room. I actually changed code and I didn't have time to test it. I can't remember if that's exactly how it went, but I still remember the fear that I had broken the entire thing before having to show it to everybody. And so, yeah, that's probably, for at least me, like, probably the most memorable, just because I was like, holy crap, am I going to be able to do this? And now, of course, it really shouldn't have been that stressful, but, I really wanted to, because I thought the game was amazing. I really wanted to be able to show people it. It ended up working just fine. when we got up there and had to go play.
I have a bunch of memories.
Yeah, it's really hard to pick one.
Yeah, there are a lot. Out there, sure.
All right. Let me think if I can. Let's see if I can narrow some down. So, there was the one time when we had maybe a dozen dudes in a room with some game needed like a choir. And so we had everybody had their phones out and we were recording music. And then if you've seen the video of the dude singing the Halo theme in the bathroom, that's basically what we were doing.
It was last year's.
Was that last year's? Really?
It was.
Jeez, this last year's been weird. That was a lot of fun. I don't know if any of us were on key. No. There was one time when there was a game where you were stuck on a raft and you were trying to float around and get stuff, and there was a radio. So I went into another room with my friend Elizabeth, and we got her mic set up, and we made a bunch of radio programs that you could switch between. So we did like talk shows, we did things in other fake languages, we made bad music. I remember doing some Foley. So we had a bucket full of water and we spilled it all over the floor of the classroom we were in. That was a lot of fun. So one of our participants is a regular, and he makes the effort to show up every time, even though he's got a full life and a family and everything. And his birthday is usually on the weekend. So
his birthday always falls during global.
Yes.
His last days.
His last name is Kilby. So we, as the leadership group, we had a cake printed that was Kirby with a party hat and his face photoshopped into the Kirby, and it said "Happy Birthday, Kilby." And we presented it to him, and I I think he was so embarrassed. I don't know if he liked it or not, but it was a lot of fun. What else? Lots of other things. I love game jams.
My favorite memories are when I always love it when there's the most people there, because that means that there's more games to be shown off, and then there's more networking opportunities. But I think the best one was probably I had reached out to other tech leaders in the area, whether at different companies or startups, and then I also had reached out to the local news and the college news and stuff like that, and they had come in. I told them, like, we are going to be presenting games at this time on Sunday. If you would like to come in anytime between the weekend and get B-roll of people working, you can. But I think that was the coolest part, not just for like our chapter, but just for the people in general, is that they got to be interviewed based off what they got to make over the weekend. I thought that was a really cool one. Yeah, there's just so many. Like you will have a story if you participate in global.
Absolutely.
It's just there's so many to pick from of what's the most memorable one.
Whenever I think about game jams, it always comes down to that like same kind of thing that Austin was talking about, where you're getting down to the wire. You're like an hour or two before you need to put the project up, or it's just not gonna make it. And you're just rushing to get whatever last feature you have finished or fix the bugs that are just game breaking. And for me, it's not that necessarily, but afterwards, after you've done it, you've finished it, it's over, you worked your butt off for, at least a couple days, and you made something and it's done, and you're like, this is it. This is something I made. And specifically last year, I remember we worked like crazy all weekend. We finished it and we got it out, and that was Gastronaut. And then afterwards, we all decided to go to
A restaurant that was within walking distance.
Yeah, the macaroni and cheese known restaurant, and there was I don't know, maybe like 8 of us or something that went.
I think it was 2 different teams. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were just all dead, like completely dead. But I remember that meal tasting so freaking good. After that, it was just like a combination of this like euphoria from finishing a game, having like a great meal with great people, and just like an amazing way to finish out the weekend. And I think that's probably one of my favorite memories from a game jam.
I vaguely remember that because I'm pretty sure I fell asleep at the table.
Yeah.
Branden regularly stays up through the night because Global Game Jam sometimes goes overnight. So he wakes up at ridiculous hours in the morning to get there in time to open things up and stays way late. I don't know how he does it.
We have I have very specific rules for global. Branden, you can keep this in if you want. But what I typically do, a normal global game jam will start on a Friday. And it starts anywhere between 5 and 6 o'clock. I tell everyone, show up at 5, and you can filter in. I will release the theme at 6. We do the theme at 6, but it's accompanied probably by anywhere between like a 15 to 20 minute video, and then the theme is revealed at the end of that. How I typically run things is I will tell people is like, you guys can like talk with other people that are brainstorming different ideas, figure out what teams you want to work on, brainstorm the game that you want to work on, and you can get started tonight. Depending on the time, you can also just head home and start tomorrow morning, whichever. It's kind of up to them. But I always make a point to kick everybody out at midnight because it's important for everyone to get at least one good night's sleep in. And then, so I'm up until at least midnight or 1, depending on cleanup from that night. And then I will get up early and I will open the doors around like 6 in the morning. And of course, nobody's ever there at 6 in the morning. But I will open the doors and then I will stay there probably until like, we've changed it up in the past years, but I will probably stay there anywhere between midnight and 3 in the morning. And then I might go home and sleep a little bit to come back Sunday morning. But there are some people who they're like, no, I value my sleep. It's 1, 2 in the morning. I'm going to head home and sleep and I'll be back at 8 or 9 Sunday. There's some people who want to work throughout the night. There's some people who find a couch or a bench somewhere and take a nap and then get back to working. God knows how many times we've worked on something and then you're like, oh yeah, it's like, I need to go get another cup of coffee. What time is it? Like, oh, it's 4 in the morning. When did that happen? Yeah, it's like the schedule can be a little crazy. It's a lot easier staying up one night into the next day than staying up all of it. So
I will say that if it is your first game jam, you're going to do this one coming up, or for example, I would actually recommend not staying up throughout the night. And as Branden said, like people that first started doing it, they may do that to try to get the best game possible or whatever, at the end of the time. But not only is that not really what it's about, but also 2, the longer you stay up, at least for me, you're borrowing concentration and ability to work on the game from the next day. And so pulling it, from the next day could be useful because you can get through that thing that you were working on. But more likely, it's better to actually stop working on it, especially if it's a hard problem, and then come back the next day with a good amount of sleep. Preferably even just do 8 hours. Like you don't have to get up early or whatever. Right? At least in my opinion, I've made great game jam games without sacrificing almost any sleep. Right? And generally, I get around 7 hours. But on normal days, I get 8. So I sacrifice like an hour of sleep when I'm doing game jams. But I do feel like with sleep, you will actually probably make better work than going without sleep. Just as an aside, because I know a lot of people when they first get into it, they think, oh, it's required to stay up the entire night. They hear about these game jams that are 48 hours and they have people, bringing them water and, snacks, stuff like that while they're constantly coding for the entire time. It doesn't need to be that intense, honestly. You can just make the game smaller and not kill yourself, and it'll feel a lot better. Still work hard, of course.
Yeah, and also if you have a job, which most of us do,
Right.
and you stay up over the weekend, you're going to have a miserable week the next week, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
Do drink water. Remember, kids, drink lots of water.
That's true.
I think a lot of that is just having that communication with your team. Say it's like, hey, I got work on Monday. It's like I can't do that. So maybe we narrow the scope a little bit so we can all sleep or something like that. And if the whole sleep thing doesn't affect you all that much and you can get all your rest in that you need Sunday night and then Monday for work, then maybe you can do whatever. I think it depends on the person, and it can also depend on what project that you're working on.
The way I like to think about it is, my favorite game jams are the ones that I didn't stay up all night, and the ones that I had such a small scope with that I actually finished like going into Sunday. So it was ready going into Sunday, and we had, all these other ideas, and we're like, okay, what are some things that we want to add to this in order to make it better? That was something that happened with Gastronaut. I'm pretty sure we finished it going into Sunday, and then we were like, what can we add? We added a leaderboard. We added a intro cinematic thing, which was fantastic, by the way. And that's why we talk about it as being like a little bit more polished, is it has these things that we were able to add, in the last half day. And those are I think the best way to do a game jam and experience it, because you don't feel dead afterwards. I mean, we were exhausted. Obviously, we'd worked all weekend, but we didn't stay up all night. We didn't, kill ourselves working on this project, and it was already pretty much done. So a lot of that stress just came from finishing up the things that we were working on instead of make the game work, right? Which is a lot more anxiety inducing.
I think there's an argument to be made that the goal here is to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Secondary goal, make connections, make friends, learn some stuff on how to make these things. But I think games are supposed to be fun. So make that the top priority. Don't do the extra mile if it makes you miserable.
Right. I actually have a question for everybody, since this year's Global Game Jam is going to be virtual, and things are going to be operating a little bit differently. What are tools or best practices that you guys would recommend for those who are experienced playing or developing games and working remotely, or those who are new and wanting to join in? Just certain things to be aware of when developing games, and what might make things a little bit easier while you're doing things from your home. For instance, something that I think that would be beneficial for everybody to know for working remotely is just taking a stab at understanding how GitHub or Perforce or something like that works, so you can share your project across all your team members. It's going to make things a lot easier than trying to throw everything up onto a Google Drive or something like that just to share files across from one another. I think that's definitely going to be a big deal for everyone for this upcoming game jam.
You stole my answer, Branden. I was going to say source control. It's kind of a complicated thing if you've never used it before, but the basics you can probably get down pat. I would try to research it and maybe try to attempt to get a flow involved. Like if you've got multiple programmers, you're going to have to figure out, have merge parties or something. So source control is one that I would dip your toes in.
I have a video on source control, a very old one, but it's how to set up Unity with GitHub, and source control is just going to make your life easier across the entire weekend and in the future. Any projects you do, you should use version control, source control. It's super important. People think about just back up your stuff. Well, source control does it for you automatically, and it helps with merging of code files and all this other stuff that you would have to deal with manually otherwise. So.
Or reversion. If you did something wrong and you want to go back or experiment with a feature, you can do a different branch. It's really, really useful.
In my opinion, if you don't know how to use source control yet, that's perfectly fine. There are a lot of things out there that make source control easier. Source control is infamously actually pretty difficult. There is some nuance there that makes it kind of hard to get into, but I know that there are solutions like Unity Collaborate that you can use that are a lot easier, especially when you're using Unity. Because the scene files and prefabs, those files that come from Unity, aren't easily merged. And if one person said, for example, modify the level and you modify it too, and you try to merge those two things together, it's actually not going to work, or probably not, right? There are ways to merge those types of files, but sometimes it doesn't, go so well. So that's something I would keep in mind. that there are other solutions out there, not just Git, for example. The other thing that I wanted to mention was something that's going to be good for this game jam is trying to find software that allows you to take control over somebody else's computer. I think that's going to be a thing. For example, if you're an artist and you're trying to push yourself to this new repo thing that you didn't know about since you started doing this game jam, then you might need a programmer to come in and actually show you how to do it. I'm not actually sure of a lot of programs that allow you to do that, so that might be homework for myself.
Chrome Remote Desktop is a good one.
Chrome Remote Desktop. I believe that's actually getting deprecated. I could be wrong about that.
It's an extension or an app, but it still functions.
Awesome. I thought that was going away, but maybe it isn't. And if it isn't, that'd be a great solution for that. I do feel like there are going to be situations where, the computer's going to get into a bad state. There are so many weird things with technology, especially Unity, for example. Like you can pull down the repo and it totally not work on your computer, and you just have no idea why that's the case. It's going to be really frustrating for you to figure out. But with the help of other people, being able to take over your computer and do the thing that needs to be done to get that to be fixed, that'll make it a whole lot easier.
I actually have two. We're getting really deep into version control right now, which it's fine. It's important. I think it's very important. But as my answer for this question that Branden had was going to be a way to thoroughly communicate with your team over the course of the weekend. So it kind of does go into that. We're moving towards that, right? Screen sharing software and communication software. So using Discord to talk and maybe share your screen. You can stream. I'm not sure if you can control stuff on Discord, but there's two applications that I use. One is AnyDesk, which is free for one person to talk to another person, and you can take control of their screen, and it's actually the way that it was built as a presentation tool that has no frame rates problems. So when you're streaming over, any other conferencing software, really, usually you're running at 10 or less frames per second, so it looks really choppy. It doesn't look good. And I've used AnyDesk professionally, and it's got minimum 30 frames per second, and it's immediate. So it's very nice in that regard. And another thing that I use every day, if you have access to it, is Microsoft Teams. They allow you to do control another person's computer with that, and it's also another option for communication through a team. So
is that free?
I don't know if it's free. I think they did make it free at one point, but
there might be some version of it that is.
Yeah,
that's why I didn't mention it, because I didn't think it was free. But
just to piggyback a little bit off what Branden said, I was going to say definitely find a way to talk to each other. This can be a matter of personal preference. I know some people like to work differently, but one thing that I really enjoy about game jams is the camaraderie and the communication. So if you can find a way to be in your own Discord server or DM or something, talking with each other, I think you'll get more out of it. And also whiteboarding. Not being in person is going to kind of make the initial prototyping stuff not as fun and interactive. I think a lot of people, we have whiteboards, for example, when we do global, we pass them out to all the teams and everybody just has a marker and they write down all their ideas and they prototype and they diagram things. And that's really fun. It's not absolutely necessary, but I think it's the tactile experience it makes it so much simpler than trying to finagle with technology. So if you can find a whiteboard solution, I know Google has Jamboard. I think Microsoft also has a whiteboard software. I would highly recommend prototyping and discussing, at least at the beginning, with that kind of a software.
And then one more that I'd have that I know has been utilized a lot just in general in global is I know some people, they want to go through and make a multiplayer game, but maybe not necessarily something over the network, and they just want to make a local couch co-op sort of game. And it's a little bit harder to test when you're working remotely. So utilizing a tool like Parsec would be a really good tool, especially for this jam, for everyone to download, so then one person can host and everyone can join in and play the game together, and you guys can do QA that way.
Parsec is kind of like Stadia. It streams someone's screen and then everybody else's controller inputs back to that computer. So it's just an easy way to do multiplayer without networking code.
Cool. Well, I will go ahead and say, let's finish off the video. If anybody has any final thoughts and wants to say, some final words about game jams, or whoever might be watching this, let's go ahead.
Do it. Oh man, I
Yeah.
love game jams. They're just so much fun.
If you participate in the 2021 Global Game Jam, be sure to leave a comment or reach out to us on our socials and show us the game that you made, because we'd love to see it.
Yeah, and the last thing I was going to say is try to do the game jam with somebody new. Don't do it just the same old people. You'll make new friends. That's probably the best thing that I've gotten from game jams.
All right. Well, I think that's great. I really appreciate you guys jumping on and adding your perspectives when it comes to game jams. And I'm hoping we can do this again. So,
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for having us.
yeah. All right. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
See
End of the
ya.
video. I don't know. I might do like an outro. I will see. But
Smash that like button, leave a comment below.
we'll do it again. Smash the like, smash the subscribe. Yeah.
Ring that
If you want to see
subscribe
more of
button,
this,
like
let
that.
me know, because the
Bring that
collaboration.
goober.
I think it went really well.
That goober.